Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I've got a quick request. Our channel has been seeing a bit of a dip lately, and hitting that subscribe button is one of the best ways to support us. It's fast, free, and really helps us keep producing content you love. Thanks for being awesome, and let's keep growing this together. Now let's get into the story. Hi Reddit. I'm a 36-year-old guy with something heavy on my mind, and I wanted to share it. I'm not asking for advice. I've already made my choices, but maybe someone out there will find this story relatable or interesting. It's about my marriage to Samantha, a 34-year-old woman I've been with for almost 10 years. I thought she was my soulmate, but I was wrong. Here's how everything went down. It all started 8 years ago when I met Samantha at a high-end clothing store. I won't name it, but it's one of those places where the staff greets you by name if you're a regular. I started visiting because I needed quality suits for work, and I liked the vibe of the store. Samantha worked there as a sales associate, and from the moment I met her, I was captivated. She had this magnetic energy, a natural charisma that made you feel like the most important person in the room. She could make even the smallest interaction feel personal, like she genuinely cared about me. I found myself visiting the store more often, not because I needed more clothes, I had plenty, but because I enjoyed spending time with her. After a while, I worked up the courage to ask her out. She said yes, and we clicked instantly. She told me about her upbringing, how she came from a modest background, and dreamed of something bigger. She wanted to travel, own a beautiful home, and live a life that seemed out of reach to most people. I admired that ambition. We dated for about a year before getting married, and during that time, I was moving up in my career. Samantha was still working at the store. She loved her job, and I could see she was thriving in it. But as our relationship grew more serious, she started talking about leaving. She felt retail wasn't her future, and she wanted more. At the time, I didn't mind. If anything, I was happy to support her. I was in a position to do so, and I wanted her to pursue her dreams. So, when we got married, Samantha quit her job. She said it was time for something bigger, that retail had become beneath her. I didn't think much of it. I was just doing what I thought was right, providing for her. But looking back, that was when things started to change. At first, it was small things. She wanted to upgrade her wardrobe, which seemed reasonable. But soon, she wasn't content with clothes from regular stores. She wanted high-end designer labels. Gucci, Chanel, Louis Vuitton. What began as a few splurges became a monthly routine. It wasn't just about new clothes, it was about presenting an image. She started posting pictures of herself on social media, showing off her outfits, luxury handbags, and glamorous dinners. Everything about our life appeared flawless, as if we were living the dream. But the reality was, we weren't there yet. Sure, I was doing well, but we weren't exactly rolling in money. She got really involved in charity events and social clubs, which seemed positive at first. She said it was about giving back and making connections, but as time went on, I noticed that her focus was more on the appearance of these events rather than any genuine involvement. She spent hours getting ready, choosing the perfect outfit for Instagram, and then spent the evening mingling with people she barely knew. It felt like she was chasing validation rather than enjoying herself. There were other signs too. Samantha began looking down on her old coworkers, dismissing the very people she once cared about. She'd make comments like, "Can you believe so-and-so is still working there?" I could never go back to that. It wasn't just her attitude toward others that changed. She started subtly criticizing me, my clothes, my watch, even my car. It wasn't harsh, but it felt like she was comparing me to the people she admired in these circles. And then there was the secrecy. Samantha had always been open about her schedule, but now, she'd mention plans without any details. She'd casually say, "I'm meeting a friend for lunch," and when I'd ask who, she'd brush it off or change the subject. I didn't think much of it at first, but deep down, it planted a seed of doubt. I didn't realize it at the time, but somewhere along the way, Samantha's ambition had turned into something darker: entitlement. She wasn't the woman I fell in love with anymore. She was more concerned with appearances and status than with the life we were supposed to be building together. I didn't see how much I was losing her until it was too late. Now, here's where things got really strange. Samantha had always been more tech-savvy than me, and we had one of those Amazon Alexa devices in the house. I barely used it except for the occasional reminder or to play music while I worked, but Samantha relied on it for everything: grocery lists, reminders, even scheduling. It was just a tool for her, but it ended up being the key to exposing everything. One Friday night, Samantha said she had a late charity meeting. It wasn't unusual. She'd been involved with several organizations, and I was used to her attending these events. She left the house around 8 p.m., dressed in an expensive gown, hair and makeup done like she was going to some gala. I didn't question it. I figured she wanted to make a good impression. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Alexa chimed in with a reminder: "Meeting with Trevor at 9 p.m. at the Capitol Grill." I froze. The Capitol Grill? That was an upscale steakhouse, the kind of place you go for a special occasion, not a casual charity meeting. And Trevor? I didn't know any Trevor in her life. My mind raced. Was this a mistake? But if it was work-related, why hadn't she mentioned it? And why was she being so secretive? Then it hit me. I knew the manager of that restaurant, Mike. He'd helped me with reservations a few times for business dinners, and I still had his number saved. Without thinking, I dialed his number. "Hey Mike," I said, trying to sound casual, "this might sound weird, but I need a favor. My wife might be at the Capitol Grill tonight. Can you check if she's there?" Mike hesitated when I called. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. "Not really," I admitted. "If you see her, just let me know. And if you can, maybe snap a picture or two. I need to know what's going on." There was a brief pause, and then Mike agreed. "All right, I'll keep an eye out." "What's she wearing?" I gave him the details, and he said he'd call if he saw her. As soon as I hung up, I started pacing. My mind was racing with possibilities. A part of me was holding on to hope that this was some kind of mistake. But deep down, I knew that what I'd uncovered so far wasn't a coincidence. Around 9:30, my phone buzzed. It was Mike. "She's here," he said. "She's with a younger guy." My stomach churned. I waited for the next message. Mike sent a photo. There she was, sitting across from a guy who looked barely older than his mid-20s. He had that confident, almost arrogant air, rolled-up sleeves, a flashy watch, and a smug grin like he owned the place. Samantha was laughing, leaning in closer than she ever did with me. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. Mike offered to keep taking pictures. "Yeah," I replied. "Just keep sending what you can for the next 20 minutes. Over the next half hour, Mike sent me more photos and even a short video. In the video, they were leaving together, walking side by side, their hands brushing in a way that made it clear they were comfortable with each other, too comfortable. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The next morning, those images were all I could think about. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Samantha with that guy. All the little signs I had ignored, the secretive behavior, the criticisms, her obvious distraction, flashed through my mind. I knew now that this wasn't a misunderstanding. But I needed more than a few photos to confirm what I suspected. So, I played it cool. When Samantha came home that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She told me her charity meeting went well and tried to feed me some fake details about the event. I nodded along, pretending to care, but inside, I was boiling. The puzzle pieces were coming together. I wasn't at the point of confronting her yet. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. I'd never done anything like that before, but I figured this guy would know exactly what to do. I gave him all the details I had, Samantha's schedule, the places she frequented, and what Mike had told me about Trevor. It didn't take long for the PI to gather the evidence. Within a week, he handed me a file that would make anyone's blood boil. It was filled with photos, receipts, and detailed reports of Samantha's affair. She wasn't just seeing Trevor once or twice. This had been going on for months. The photos were damning. Samantha and Trevor at fancy restaurants, holding hands in public, and even sitting on a park bench together, looking like they had no care in the world. There were even photos of them leaving a boutique hotel, way too comfortable for just a fling. And then there were the receipts. Samantha had been paying for everything, dinners, hotel stays, even gifts for Trevor. The PI had found a receipt from a high-end men's store. Samantha had bought Trevor a designer watch that probably cost more than my first car. And how was she paying for all this? With my money, of course. Every swipe of her card, every dollar spent, was coming from the accounts I had worked tirelessly to build. The PI didn't stop there. He found Trevor's social media accounts, and let me tell you, this guy was a joke. He was one of those wannabe influencers, posting shirtless selfies, motivational quotes, and pictures of him partying at clubs. He didn't have a real job, but he was living like he did, thanks to Samantha. I couldn't believe it. There I was, busting my ass every day to provide a comfortable life for my wife, and she was using it to fund this loser's lifestyle. Trevor was at least 10 years younger than her, and judging by his Instagram, he thought he was destined for fame but hadn't done a single thing to earn it. He worked as a bartender at a trendy cocktail lounge, a place Samantha had started going to under the guise of networking events. It was insulting, pathetic even, that Samantha, the woman who once insisted on dining at Michelin-starred restaurants and wearing designer clothes, was running around with a guy who couldn't even afford dinner at Applebee's. By now, I had everything I needed, solid proof. The PI's file was airtight, and there was no way Samantha could talk her way out of it. But I wasn't about to just confront her in private. Samantha had spent years building an image of herself as the perfect wife, the high society, charitable, elegant woman. If she wanted to live in the spotlight, I was going to make sure everyone saw the truth. I began planning my move. This wasn't just about catching her. It was about making sure she couldn't slither away without facing the consequences. I wanted her to be exposed for who she really was, in front of everyone who mattered to her. A week after receiving the PI's report, I invited everyone important to Samantha, her old coworkers from the clothing store, the ones she'd looked down on after quitting, the members of her charity board, and the women from her social circles who had always hung on her every word. These were the people who thought Samantha was untouchable, the ones she'd spent years trying to impress. I even invited a few of my friends, just to have some backup in case things got heated. I told everyone it was a celebration of Samantha's charity work and our marriage. It wasn't hard to sell. Her friends loved any excuse to dress up and drink on someone else's dime. Meanwhile, I worked with my lawyer to finalize the divorce paperwork. By the time the party came around, the wheels would be in motion. I wasn't about to let Samantha wiggle her way out of this one. The night of the party, she was in her element. Hours spent perfecting her look, parading around the house in her expensive dress and heels, making sure everything was flawless. She asked me if I was excited about the event. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "Oh, I'm definitely excited," I told her, holding back the grin. When the guests started arriving, Samantha was glowing. She played the perfect hostess, greeting everyone with that charm of hers, making sure drinks were flowing and chatting up the women who idolized her. Watching her soak it all in was almost entertaining. But I knew the time had come for everything to change. Once everyone had settled, drinks in hand, I stood up to make a toast. Samantha gave me a smile that said she expected compliments, more of the same flattery she'd been used to. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Tonight's a special night. I want to celebrate the truth, because sometimes the truth has a funny way of coming out." The room went silent. Samantha's smile faltered, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out where I was going with this. It was too late. I pulled out the folder from the private investigator. This was my trump card, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I clicked a button on the small remote in my hand, and the first image appeared on the wall behind me, Samantha and Trevor holding hands at the Capitol Grill. The room erupted into whispers. "This," I said, pointing to the photo, "is Samantha, my loving wife, with Trevor, a bartender she's been seeing for months." I clicked again, and a video started playing. It was footage of Samantha and Trevor leaving a hotel together, laughing, smiling, clearly at ease. I kept going, showing receipts for the dinners and gifts she had bought for Trevor, all paid for with my money. I even showed screenshots of the Alexa reminders she had set up for their little meetups. Samantha stood frozen. Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. "Are you kidding me?" one of her charity friends blurted, her face full of disbelief. She turned to Samantha. "Is this for real?" Samantha stammered, trying to explain, but I cut her off. "Save it," I said. "The evidence speaks for itself." Her old coworkers from the clothing store were whispering among themselves, clearly enjoying the moment. One even muttered, "Karma's a bitch." Samantha looked around the room, desperate for someone to defend her. But no one did. Even her closest friends were too stunned to speak up. I wrapped up my speech with one final bombshell. "I've already filed for divorce," I said. "There's nothing left to say." Samantha stormed out, humiliated. I didn't bother stopping her. She could run if she wanted, but the damage was done. The party didn't end there, though. Most of the guests stayed, finishing their drinks and gossiping about what had just transpired. Her charity friends were especially vocal, saying things like, "I can't believe she'd do this," and "I always thought she was a little too into appearances." Her old coworkers, however, looked like they were having the time of their lives. One of them even came up to me and said, "You handled that better than I would have. She always thought she was better than us." By the end of the night, I felt a sense of relief. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of this marriage, unsure of what was going on. Now everything was out in the open. Samantha's carefully crafted facade had shattered, and there was no going back. The next logical step was to get Samantha out of my life for good. Thankfully, the divorce process was as smooth as it could be, thanks to one key decision I made years ago, the prenup. When Samantha and I were engaged, I insisted on a prenup. At the time, it was a tough conversation. She pushed back hard, saying things like, "Don't you trust me?" and, "If we're getting married, why do we need something so transactional?" But I stood my ground. I explained that it wasn't about trust, it was about protecting both of us in case things went wrong. I'd worked hard for everything I had, and I wasn't going to risk it. In the end, she signed it. I think she assumed it was a formality, something I'd forget about over time because she was so convinced we'd be together forever. But that decision turned out to be the smartest one I'd ever made. The morning after the party, I started packing up her things. I didn't wait for her to come back and plead her case. I wasn't interested. I met with my lawyer, who had already laid the groundwork for the divorce. It was just a matter of putting things into motion. My lawyer filed the papers, complete with all the evidence of Samantha's infidelity, photos, receipts, the PI's report. It was airtight. A few days later, Samantha was served. I didn't tell her it was coming, so I can only imagine the shock when she opened that envelope. She didn't call me right away, which was surprising. I figured she was either in denial or scrambling to figure out her next move. When she finally called, it was classic Samantha. First, she cried, begging for forgiveness, saying she'd made a mistake and that we could work through it. When I didn't budge, she flipped the script. Suddenly, I was the villain for filing for divorce. She accused me of humiliating her, of setting her up to look bad in front of everyone. I kept my cool. Talk to my lawyer, I told her. That's when she started trying to fight the prenup. Her lawyer argued that she deserved more because she had sacrificed her career to support me. She claimed quitting her job at the clothing store had been for my benefit and that I owed her compensation for all her hard work in the marriage. My lawyer shut that down immediately. The evidence of her lavish spending and affair gave her zero leverage. She wasn't supporting me, she was draining me. The judge wasn't impressed with her arguments. In the end, Samantha walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and a small settlement outlined in the prenup, just enough to cover a few months of basic living expenses. It was laughable compared to the lifestyle she'd been used to. I, on the other hand, kept everything. The house, the car, the savings, even the furniture and appliances. There was no drawn-out battle. The prenup made everything crystal clear, with no loopholes for her to exploit. The whole process was surprisingly quick. From the moment I filed to the day it was finalized, it only took a few months. I think part of the reason it moved so fast was that Samantha didn't have the resources to drag it out. Without my money, she couldn't afford a high-powered lawyer or a lengthy legal battle. When the divorce was finalized, it felt like the weight of the past few months, the lies, the betrayal, the stress, was finally gone. Samantha was no longer my problem. Even after the divorce, Samantha tried to push her luck. She emailed me a few times, accusing me of being heartless, saying I was punishing her for a mistake. She called me selfish and claimed I'd ruined her life. The truth? Samantha ruined her own life. Samantha made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. I didn't respond to any of her emails, there was no point. As far as I was concerned, our relationship was over the moment she chose Trevor over me. By now, you'd think Samantha would have learned her lesson, but life still had a few more wake-up calls in store for her. Watching her fall from grace was both satisfying and surreal. After the dust settled, I started hearing bits and pieces about her life through mutual acquaintances. One of the first things she did after the divorce was try to go back to the clothing store where we first met. I'm not sure if she thought she could waltz in and pick up where she left off, but she was in for a rude awakening. The store manager turned her down flat. Word about the party and the affair had spread, and no one wanted to take her on. The manager, who knew me back when I was a regular, even told a mutual friend that Samantha's reputation was toxic and they didn't want to deal with the drama. She had burned bridges she didn't even realize. As for Trevor, he didn't stick around for long. Once the money dried up, the private investigator's report painted a clear picture of who he was, a guy who coasted on charm and good looks, jumping from one sugar mama to the next. Samantha was just another stepping stone for him. I heard through the grapevine that she tried to reach out to him after the divorce, but he ghosted her. No calls, no texts, nothing. She had bankrolled his lifestyle for months, but as soon as she couldn't keep it up, he moved on to his next target. Part of me wondered if she ever realized just how little she meant to him or if she was too delusional to see it. Without Trevor, and without my financial support, Samantha's life started unraveling. She ended up renting a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the upscale neighborhoods she used to frequent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all she could afford with her small settlement and whatever she managed to get from selling off her designer items. Speaking of which, another blow to her ego. Samantha loved her luxury handbags, shoes, and jewelry. But now, she was forced to start selling them just to make ends meet. I even heard she tried to sell one of her handbags back to a boutique she used to shop at. They lowballed her on the offer, and she had no choice but to take it. One of the most bizarre moments of this whole mess happened a few months after the divorce. I was at home, minding my own business, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Trevor standing there. For a moment, I didn't even recognize him. He looked rough, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by something I can only describe as desperation. Hey man, he started, scratching the back of his head. Can we talk? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. What do you want? Trevor launched into this rambling apology, claiming he didn't know Samantha was married when they first started seeing each other. He said she told him we were separated and that I was emotionally abusive, which was laughable, considering who Samantha really was. He went on, saying Samantha had promised him money, my money, and now that she was broke, he was struggling. He even had the audacity to ask if I could help him out, since, in his words, she dragged both of us into this mess. I laughed in his face. You've got some nerve coming here, I said. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Don't ever come back. Then I slammed the door in his face. The fact that he thought I'd give him a dime was hilarious. He was just as entitled as Samantha, and I had no sympathy. Samantha, meanwhile, wasn't done trying to crawl back into my life. She called and texted me several times, begging for a second chance. She said she'd made a mistake, that she missed us, and even tried to guilt-trip me by saying she was lost without me and didn't know how to move forward. The worst moment came when she showed up at my house unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, disheveled and crying. She said she wanted to talk, that she just needed one chance to explain herself. I didn't let her in. I didn't even entertain the idea. You made your bed, I told her. Now lie in it. Then I closed the door in her face. That was the last time I saw her in person. Over the next few months, Samantha's downfall became the talk of our old social circle. She went from being the glamorous center of attention to a cautionary tale. People who used to fawn over her started distancing themselves, not wanting to be associated with the drama. Her charity friends replaced her with someone else, and the women in her social club stopped inviting her to events. Every now and then, someone would ask me if I'd heard from her. I'd just shake my head and say, nope. Samantha's life now is a shadow of what it once was. The woman who used to flaunt her designer lifestyle and act like she was above everyone else is now scraping by, trying to hold on to whatever dignity she has left. She's no longer the queen of her social circles. She's the cautionary tale that everyone whispers about. As for me, I'm at peace. I've learned a lot from this experience, but the biggest takeaway is this: entitlement and greed will destroy you if you let them. Samantha built her life on appearances, and when that facade crumbled, she had nothing left. Thanks, Reddit, for letting me get this off my chest. Your feedback and support mean a lot. Stay strong, everyone.